Hello, and welcome to another edition of Inside SMC. There are literally thousands of objects in orbit around the Earth. The United States Air Force is responsible for tracking every object orbiting the planet. That's at least the size of a baseball. As objects are getting smaller and smaller and more numerous in space, the Air Force seeks better ways of tracking them. In July, the United States Air Force is set to launch the first of its kind SBSS, Space-Based Space Surveillance Satellite. Now, SBSS will give the Air Force the ability to detect and track space objects from space. So, who's going to track the SBSS? Well, when the Minotaur 4 rocket carrying SBSS lifts off from the pad at Vandenberg, the launch telemetry data will be tracked by two ships in the Pacific Ocean, the Worthy and the Pacific Collector.
The Pacific Collector is a mandatory asset, and it has the predominance of the coverage up through spacecraft separation. And we wanted to have an Air Force liaison on the ship itself to help facilitate any questions, any problems that might arise, so that somebody who understands the SBSS mission, knows the people involved, and is also on site with the folks from the ship to work through any problems that might arise.
We'll bring you a full report on the Worthy and the Pacific Collector in our next edition of Inside SMC. Well, over 50 airmen and their families stationed here at Los Angeles Air Force Base were recognized for service in deployments around the world. Lair Austin takes us to the Welcome Home ceremony.
More than 50 Air Force members and their families are honored at a homecoming ceremony at Los Angeles Air Force Base. The airmen recently returned from services in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait. The men and women have served deployments between 6 months and 1 year in support of combat operations.
We that wear the uniform of the United States have been summoned to answer the call someplace in the world for years. Ever since the Revolutionary War, before we were a country, we were answering the call that our country put out for us. And you know what? We're all volunteers, every one of us. Everyone that wears the uniform today is a volunteer. So we stepped forward, you stepped forward, and you said, I'll go. And thanks for doing that. To the entire SMC team, thank you for what you're doing. To the returnees, thanks for what you did. Welcome home. Thanks very much.
And the parking gridlock at Los Angeles Air Force Base is set to improve, according to Lieutenant Colonel John Brinkman, the base parking monitor. Roy Harper took a walk through the parking lot to bring us this report.
Finding parking is a major concern for employees at Los Angeles Air Force Base.
I'm a commuter, and I usually leave my house at 5:15, and knowing that I can't park on the base, I actually have to leave a little earlier. And I have to allow myself an extra 15 to 20 minutes to walk across the street and into my job.
Parking on the base is extremely limited. Management continues to develop ways to solve the parking problem.
Our team at CE did a survey last year, and we set up a series of construction projects. We have gone to the south fence behind the BX, moved the curb back and added about 49 spaces behind the fence. We managed to squeeze another 13 in by the gas station, and we just finished phase 1 next to the north fence, which cleaned up that area, got a lot of equipment out of there, and opened up and restriped 40 plus parking spaces by the north fence. This week I will be issuing 80 new parking passes. What this does is our original numbers were 785 people would win in the lottery. I just updated that by 80, so now 865 people who participate in the lottery will have lottery parking passes.
Plans to build a parking garage on base or in the works.
If everything goes according to schedule, we'll be breaking ground on a parking garage in the northwest corner of the base. We won't see the parking garage for another 13 months, so that would be February of 12.
I can't wait till we get the parking garage. Well, it's hard to park on base after a certain time, maybe around 8 o'clock. It's hard to find parking.
Well, parking here is always challenging, and occasionally what we have, I think, is people who either in a hurry and rush their choice of parking spaces, or people who think they found a hole in the system and found a secret spot that nobody else knows about. And usually the truth is somebody else does know about it, and they complain when you park in their spot. We've had a couple of cases where people look at the numbered spaces on the parking lot. They don't see anybody parked there for a couple of days in a row, and they think they can park in there and get away with that. The truth is, all of those numbered spaces are assigned to key personnel on base. If they're not parking in there, it's probably because they're on TDY or leave, and they'll come back, and that's usually when we catch somebody in the key personnel slots. The other issue we have sometimes is we have a fair number of folks, I think, who will park in the exchange or commissary customer parking. Those we've set aside for actual customers, not for employees of SMC, and so we do see some people from time to time trying to park with their lottery passes in those customer parking spaces.
Well, I guess that means I better go move my car. Just kidding. And that'll do it for this edition. Be sure to join us again next time when we take you inside SMC.